Hi. So I know you're a Python developer. Now you're asking, what is a virtual environment? Well, a virtual environment in this case, in short, a virtual environment is an isolated workspace. Okay. So you have a project that you're working on. So first of all, you have a global storage, your local storage. So this is your local storage in your computer. So if you have a local storage, okay, that means anytime that you are installing something, it's installed in your local storage. Okay, so for example, you have downloaded Python and you have installed Python in your machine. Python has been installed in the local storage. Okay, now let's say you are now working with Python libraries. Now you are now at the advanced stage of Python. Now you are working with Python libraries. Now it comes to a point that libraries, they come in different versions. Okay, so let's say you are working on a project. So project one, you have project one and you have project two. So let's say you want to use Flask. So project one requires Flask version 2.0. So let's say you are using Flask. So Flask in this case is a Python library. Now you are working with libraries. So you are installing Flask. So project one wants to use Python Flask 2.0. Project 2 requires Flask 3.0. Okay, so we're saying a virtual environment is an isolated Python workspace. So when you have a local storage like this, if you install Flask using pip, so let's say pip install Flask. If you install Flask globally using pip, pip is a Python package manager. So it is used to install Python libraries. So if you have installed pip in the local storage globally, that means your whole machine is using that version of Flask that you have installed. For example, in this case, you have installed Flask 3.0. Okay, so once it has been installed in your local machine, that means it is globally. And every time that you are working with a Python, you are working for a Python project and you want to use Flask, it's going to use Flask 3.0. Okay, so now this can be a challenge if you're working on multiple projects which wants to use different versions of Flask. So in this case, let's say you have another project that wants to use Flask 2.0. But if Flask has been installed globally, 3.0, because in the local storage this is a global installation. If Flask has been installed globally, so it will not be possible for you to work on project 1 which wants to use Flask 2.0. It will be possible for this one, for project 2, to use Flask 3.0 because it is what has been installed globally. Now, to solve this challenge, now that's where virtual environment comes in. So virtual environment is an isolated workspace. So in this case, to avoid all these, you are not supposed to install dependencies globally in your local storage. Okay, so to allow you to work with multiple projects which requires different versions of the libraries, you are supposed to create a virtual environment for each project. So a virtual environment is an isolated workspace for each Python project that you are working on. So in this case, each project has its own versions of the dependencies that they are using without compromising other projects. So for example, for this project, for you to work with this project for Flask 2.0, you are supposed to create a separate virtual environment. So in this case, within the local storage, so a virtual environment, it will be a separate workspace which requires Flask 2.0 only. So you can create another environment which requires Flask 3.0. You can create another environment which is using, for example, Django. I think Django 5 point something. Another one which is using Django 2 point something. So in this case, you are not supposed to, compromise the other projects. Each project can work separately with its own dependencies. I hope that's clear. Now, how do you create a virtual environment? So when you have installed Python in your machine, you have downloaded Python and you have installed the latest version of Python, which is 3 point going up. Okay, so once you have Python in your machine, you can create a virtual environment. So how to create a virtual environment? Well, first of all, you create a project directory. So you create a separate folder for your project. Okay, so once you have created your project, let's say project 1. So you have created a separate directory for your project. Now, in that project directory is where now you can create a virtual environment. So to create a virtual environment, you say, in this case using Windows, you say Python, okay, dot module, then meaning virtual environment. This is a standard way of writing a virtual environment in the terminal. So, and then you give the name of the virtual environment. So in this case, I'll just give it the same dot then. You can give it any name you want, whether the same then or then. Any name that you want, but make sure it's it should not confuse with the other libraries, because once you do this, it's going to create a separate folder in the same project directory written in the name of the virtual environment. So without wasting time, let me just show you how to create a virtual environment in Windows. Alright, so now I'm in my Windows machine, so I'll open the terminal. So inside the terminal, now I'll go to desktop. So on my desktop, I'll create a project folder, a directory that I want to keep all my files for my project. So I'll create a new folder. So I'll just call this project. So now I have a new folder written project. So I'll go inside the project. So now I'm inside the project. For now, you can see there's nothing. If you list all the directories in the folder, there's nothing. So what I'm supposed to do now is to say, okay, I want to create a virtual environment. So to create a virtual environment, I have to make sure that I have Python installed in my machine. So to check the version of Python, just say Python -- version. So I have the latest version of Python 3. Any version of Python 3 going up. So to create a virtual environment, now say python.module, then, and I'll give in the name of the virtual environment. So I'll say, okay, should also be then. So just wait for a moment. Yeah. So now if you list, if I say ls, now I'm going to see that now I have a directory. Okay, I have a new directory written then. So then now is my virtual environment directory that has been created. So for now, to go into the virtual environment, to activate the virtual environment, I need to go into the environment to activate it, so that I should install dependencies in it. So to activate the virtual environment using Windows, so I'll say, okay, then. So I'll say scripts activate. So once you write this command, it's going to activate the virtual environment, and then you press enter. So you see, it's going to show that now you are inside the virtual environment. Okay. So once you have a then at the beginning of the command, that means now you are inside now the virtual environment. Okay. So inside this virtual environment is where now you can install all the dependencies that you want to use for your project. For example, I'll say, okay, pip install Django. So in this case, if I want to use the Python library called Django, now I have to install it inside the virtual environment. Do not install dependencies globally into your machine. Once you do that, it's going to install into your local machine. That means every time you want to work with a project, it's going to use that global installation, which is not good. You create a virtual environment and then go into the virtual environment and then start installing dependencies, so that each and every project that you are using should have separate dependencies which are not going to compromise with other projects. Okay, so in this case you have installed Django. Okay, so how do you deactivate the virtual environment? So to deactivate the virtual environment, you just write deactivate, then now you are out of the virtual environment. Okay, so yeah, this is how you create a virtual environment in Python. A virtual environment, it's a separate Python workspace which allows you as a programmer to install dependencies for your project, which allows each and every project to use separate dependencies without compromising with each other. Thank you for watching. See you next video.